Hello, everyone. We'll start the RIETI BBL webinar. Today, we welcome very distinguished guest, Ambassador Peter Tan, Ambassador of the Republic of Singapore to Japan. Ambassador Tan was Deputy Secretary Southeast Asia and ASEAN in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Singapore. And he was also ambassador to the Republic of Korea. And before becoming a Japanese ambassador, he was posted in Tokyo twice. Today, we'll listen to his perspective on the future of Japan and Singapore. Ambassador, very welcome to RIETI, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Watanabe-san. Thank you very much. A very good afternoon to everyone here. And I would like to also thank RIETI for inviting me to speak today. And I understand that this is a new series where you call it the Ambassador Series. And it is indeed an honor for me to kickstart the RIETI's Ambassadors Series. Today, I will keep my presentation maybe to about 20 minutes or so, and open up the floor for more question and answers session later on. Let me first of all provide a broad overview of Singapore's development journey before I talk about how I see the future of Singapore and Japan relations. In our development journey, as many of you would know, Singapore is a relatively young nation. We gained independence in 1965. It is a small country, about 710 kilometers square, which is about the size of Tokyo, Nijusanku, or the Awajishima in Hyogo-ken. Singapore has no hinterland. We lack natural resources, and we even depended on others for water. The development of Singapore since 1965 is in part owed much to the support of foreign friends and partners. Japan is one such friend and partner. Japanese companies invested in Singapore and set up shop during our early days of development in the 1990s and 1970s and 1980s. And Singapore has also learned much from the best practices of Japan, such as improving productivity and quality standards. And in fact, for those who have been to Singapore, you may have seen our network of neighborhood police posts as shown in the slide. These police posts actually was based on Japan's Koban system. So in a sense, in our earlier industrialization period, post-independence, in the late 60s into the 70s and even in the 80s, we had learned quite a bit from Japan. The foundations of our friendship with Japan were laid by Singapore's founding Prime Minister, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew. He visited Japan regularly and had forged very close ties with Japanese leaders. For example, Nakasone Yasuhiro and Miyazawa Kiichi. Subsequent Prime Ministers, Mr. Goh Chok Tong and Mr. Lee Hsien Loong, have built on this foundation to strengthen the bilateral relationship between Singapore and Japan. Recently, Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong met Prime Minister Kishida Fumio in May this year in Tokyo. And Prime Minister Lee in turn hosted Prime Minister Kishida just a couple of weeks later in Singapore in June, when Prime Minister Kishida attended the Shangri-La Dialogue. Prime Minister Lee will be coming to Tokyo later this month to attend the state funeral of former Prime Minister Abe Shinzo. Now, these frequent high-level visits, including many other ministerial and official delegations, they highlighted how our friendship has grown from strength to strength over the past decades. In fact, we just celebrated 55 years of Singapore-Japan diplomatic relations last year. I'm happy to update that the state of Singapore-Japan relations is very good. We have substantial cooperation in many areas. A key pillar of our bilateral relation is our strong economic cooperation. Singapore and Japan ranked among each other's top trading partners, with bilateral trade standing at close to Singapore 60 billion or 6 trillion yen in 2021. This was about nearly 9% increase from 2020. Singapore is Japan's second largest investment destination in Asia. And Singapore is also Japan's top Asian investor. We host over 5,000 Japanese companies, and a number of which have set up their Asia Pacific headquarters in Singapore. Many companies also use Singapore as a base for innovation, talent, and leadership development. Singapore and Japan also share common interests in maintaining regional peace and stability and upholding an open and inclusive regional architecture. We have joined hands on many multilateral initiatives, including the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP for short, the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, or the CPTPP, and most recently, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, the IPEF. We welcome efforts by Japan to strengthen engagement with ASEAN in line with the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific. Singapore also appreciates Japan's affirmation for ASEAN centrality and look forward to celebrating the 50th anniversary of ASEAN-Japan dialogue relations next year. At this point in time, I thought it would be important and relevant to highlight that even during the COVID-19 pandemic, Singapore and Japan cooperated very closely to navigate the challenges. When countries started to shut borders following the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, there were concerns that the supply of essential goods would be affected. Singapore's Ministry of Trade and Industry then held discussions with Japan's Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry to release the joint statement on facilitating resilient economic activities for combating the COVID-19 pandemic in May 2020. This statement expressed our shared commitment to maintaining supply chain connectivity. This is particularly important at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. It also allayed concerns on the scarcity of goods in Singapore and reinforced Japan's reputation as a trusted and important partner. Both countries also work closely on vaccine multilateralism with other partners through the COVID Vaccine Global Access, or COVAX facility. Singapore and Japan also launched the Business Track Reciprocal Green Lane and Residence Track in September 2020. This was also in the early days of the pandemic, but both sides saw the need to try to maintain the kind of economic activities to keep our partners and businesses going. And Singapore was the first country with which Japan established the reciprocal green lane. This reflected our close and strong economic and people-to-people ties, as well as the high level of trust that we have in each other. Looking ahead, as the ambassador here, I'm very excited about the future of Singapore-Japan relations. There will be many opportunities for further cooperation. With our excellent relations, our shared commitment and convergence of views, there is much more we can do together. And I would like to highlight 3 specific areas. First, digital cooperation. Digitalization has already been rapidly transforming the economic landscape in Asia and the world. It has disrupted the traditional models of commerce and how companies go about conducting their businesses. The pandemic has made our reliance on digital platforms more pronounced. COVID-19 has therefore become a catalyst and made us go online, voluntarily or otherwise. The future ahead lies in the adoption of digital tools. We need to develop common frameworks and global standards to ensure that cross-border transactions and data flows are kept safe, secure, and efficient. In May this year, the 2 prime ministers witnessed the signing of MOUs on digital government transformation and startup and innovation. We also welcome the establishment of the Singapore-Japan Economic Dialogue, which amongst others will facilitate exchanges on green economy and digitalization. There are many similarities in Prime Minister Kishida's Digital Garden City initiative and Singapore's Smart Nation initiative. And there is much scope for Japan and Singapore to work on, including in prefectures across Japan in these aspects. The second area, green cooperation. As we begin to recover from one crisis, we should remember that another looms before us. Climate change is one of the gravest challenges that we face. In Singapore, we had launched our Green Plan 2030 to make a strong push for sustainable development. And in Japan, it plans to be net carbon neutral by 2050. In this space, I think we have very aligned interests and convergence of views again. And I think Singapore and Japan can build on our common stake for a more sustainable future. We had signed a memorandum of cooperation on low emission solutions in January this year, when then Meeting Minister Hagiuda visited Singapore. Such cooperation will help foster closer partnership in areas including long-term emissions reduction strategies and pathways, including green technology and green finance. The third area, infrastructure cooperation. One of Singapore's government agency, the Infrastructure Asia, and Japan's Ministry of Land Infrastructure, Transport and Tourism, MLIT, had signed a memorandum of understanding on 5th of March 2021 to promote cooperation between Japan and Singapore-based companies on regional infrastructure projects. One of a very successful cooperation project that is currently being done is in the Philippines, the new Cloud City. And this is a project that saw Singapore and Japan working together in the area of infrastructure cooperation and to provide solutions, infrastructure solutions in the Philippines. As the Southeast Asia region looks towards post-COVID-19 recovery, there would be opportunities for Singapore and Japan to work together in this sector. In particular, we have also cooperated on developing smart infrastructure in third countries in Southeast Asia, as the example of the new Cloud City in the Philippines has shown. These are just three broad areas in which Singapore and Japan can look to build and deepen the relationship. But there's more we can do. And at this point in time, I would like to take this opportunity to just mention a little bit about another aspect, a softer aspect, which I believe is just as important as those I've just mentioned earlier. Our people-to-people ties are very strong. Japan is a key business and leisure destination for Singaporeans and vice versa. Pre-COVID-19, around 900,000 Japanese visited Singapore every year. In turn, about 500,000 Singaporeans visited Singapore. Probably from the perspective of many Japanese, 500,000 may seem a small number in terms of tourist arrivals into Japan. But if you put it in context, the 500,000 Singaporeans is a representation of almost 10% of the Singapore's entire population. And this really shows the popularity of Japan to Singaporeans. Much of these interactions between the people of two countries have helped foster trust and understanding among the people, particularly during which it was much restricted and affected during the pandemic. Therefore, the news over the weekend that Japan was looking to further ease border measures and to revert to the visa waiver program for some countries would have been very much welcome. In fact, I received numerous messages after news broke up over the weekend. So I look forward to Japan reopening its borders to full tourism without the need of any visa, as in pre-COVID times. The friendship between Singapore and Japan has indeed flourished over the past 5.5 decades. And as I said earlier, I believe there's potential for us to do much more. And much will depend on the people, the companies, the government of both sides, to want to be able to pursue a common interest and common path to enhance the livelihood of the people between our two countries. On this note, thank you very much, and the floor is open for Q&A. Over to you, Watanabe-san.
Thank you, Ambassador, for very wonderful and insightful presentation on our bilateral relationships. Ambassador touched upon how closely our two countries have been nurturing our bilateral relationships at the various levels, leaders, ministerial levels, business leaders, and people-to-people levels. And going forward, you also gave us some ideas, hints of our future cooperation, such as digital transformation, green transformation, and also you are talking about, you also touched upon the infrastructure and people-to-people exchange. A very insightful and wonderful presentation. Thank you very much.